Hello, and welcome to the Flourishing Nurse podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrea Coyle, the Chief Clinical and Innovation Officer at SE Healthcare. And today, we're going to discuss meaningful recognition and how it impacts individual, group, and organization outcomes. It's my absolute honor and pleasure to welcome two very special guests, Dr. Cindy Lefton and Bonnie Barnes. A little bit about Dr. Lefton. She has combined her expertise as an organizational psychologist with her extensive experience as a registered nurse, leveraging meaningful recognition as a strategy to positively impact communication and collaboration in healthcare organizations, as well as engage staff. As a consultant for psychological associates and a frontline care provider, Cindy uses evidence and resources to promote healthy work environments. She has published articles on compassion, communication, and meaningful recognition, and has presented these topics at various national conferences. Cindy volunteers for the Daisy Foundation, conducting research that explores the impact of meaningful recognition on nurses, patients, families, and organizations. She previously served on the editorial board for the Journal of Trauma Nursing and an associate editor for the Journal of Emergency Nursing. And next, Bonnie Barnes. Bonnie is a co-founder of the Daisy Foundation. Bonnie and her husband, Mark, started the Daisy Foundation in 1999. Hopefully everyone listening knows the incredible story behind the Daisy Foundation. The Daisy Foundation was started after Bonnie's stepson, Patrick, died from an autoimmune disease, which is where the DAISY acronym comes from, diseases attacking the immune system. The Barnes family wanted to say thank you in a meaningful way to nurses for the extraordinary work they do each day. After 22 years, the DAISY Foundation partners with over 5,200 healthcare organizations and nursing schools around the world, has recognized over 177,000 nurses, and recently held the first ever International Daisy Day Conference. Bonnie has multiple articles published and is an international speaker. Bonnie, Cindy, amazing work. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's always fun to be with you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this.
Our pleasure. So let's get started. The first question is going to be for you, Cindy. Meaningful recognition and the effect it has on compassion fatigue, as well as nurse retention and engagement, is the focus of your research. So here are the questions. What were you observing in the environment that led you to explore the relationship between meaningful recognition, retention, and engagement?
Wow, that's a great question. And, I think so, this whole project got started because a woman that I had never met, who happens to be on this podcast by the name of Bonnie Barnes, we were introduced and she said, well, we want to put some science behind the Daisy Award. And that's really how this whole thing, body of research started. And when we went into it, our goal was to better understand what extraordinary nursing looked like and felt like from the perspective of people who were nominated and received the Daisy Award, from patients, their families, and coworkers who had written thousands and thousands of nominations, and then also to get a perspective from chief nurse leaders who were getting all of this information and how we're using that to shape and guide their facilities. And so the idea of meaningful recognition hadn't really, bubbled up yet. What happened was it started to bubble up as we heard what the nominees were talking about in their nominations, the honorees, what it meant to them to get this kind of recognition, and then the chief nurse leaders that we interviewed of how they were utilizing that data. And as all of this information emerged from these three sources, and again, it was our idea to get a 360-degree perspective of what it meant to receive a Daisy Award, then we started seeing the links between meaningful recognition and how powerful they were. And one nomination that always sticks out in my mind was an interview of an honoree, a Daisy honoree, who said, I was, kind of just doing my thing, kind of burnt out a little bit, coming to work, doing what I do every day, day in, day out. And I had no idea that my work was so meaningful to others. And she said, it reignited my career.
Oh, I love that, reignited. And just for you and the folks listening, I am a previous Daisy Nurse Leader Award winner, so I know how it made me feel, right? So the next question, Cindy, is how does meaningful recognition impact individual group and organization outcomes? I can speak for myself being a winner. I know how it impacted me. Can you focus more on the groups and organization outcomes?
Well, what we found in a couple different studies that we've done, the first one that you mentioned, and thank you for that, that was really the foundational piece. And then Bonnie introduced me to a really brilliant researcher named Dr. Leslie Kelly, and she is just a quantitative guru. And we partnered and went down a path, and we looked at ICU nurses, and the team piece came out in the first study that we did, but it really came out because we saw it in the first study. We were able to dig a little deeper with the second study, and the teamwork, I'll call it a phenomena because I think it is, that emerges when people are getting this type of recognition. And Bonnie can tell you of all the ceremonies that she's attended, people are always saying, well, when they receive the award, I couldn't have done this without my coworkers. There's huge team implications with this type of meaningful recognition. And from an organizational impact, the nominations tell you all of the actions that are underlying extraordinary. And in patient satisfaction data, when you get a 4 or 5 or a 9 or a 10 on HCAHPS, that's a number. What is it? It's a number. So you get these stories behind the numbers. So instead of going to your staff as a leader, and you're a leader, saying, well, we got a 9, but we really want a 10. And people are like, oh, well, why is that? But when you can tell them the stories behind the numbers from the recipients of that extraordinary nursing, the patients, their families, and peers, then that becomes the stories of our work. And as a nurse leader, that's very powerful because it provides actions and descriptions, and it elevates the value of nursing.
I love that you said elevates the value. That's kind of where we are right now with nursing. And I just recently helped one of our grateful patients nominate one of our nurses. We're going to have a big Daisy celebration, and the patient feels so valued that he was able to share that with me. So I love that you said that. One more question for you, Cindy. As a leader, in my leader experience, I've exercised providing positive feedback, and I appreciate all of its benefits. And it's so great to give the positive feedback. It's also great to receive it. As you know, positive feedback can be very simple: a thank you, a pat on the back, or even a compliment. I'm curious, can you explain what differentiates positive, meaningful recognition? Positive feedback from meaningful recognition. And what does meaningful recognition look like?
Well, I think the American Association of Critical Care Nurses was brilliant when they coined the term meaningful recognition, because it was an adjective that really gave some substance to the word recognition. And their definition is it acknowledges how a person made a difference. So if I'm giving you meaningful recognition, I'm telling you how what you did impacted me. And then that it's equal to the contribution, so that it's not like, oh, hey, thanks for this amazing thing that you did, or smarmy words going on and on and on about maybe something that wasn't such a big deal. But also very important is that it's relevant to you. So I'm giving you feedback, meaningful feedback about how it impacted me in a way that's meaningful to you. And that's what's different than positive feedback. Meaningful recognition is a form of positive feedback. but it's meaningful.
I love that. Great description. Okay, Bonnie. In healthcare, patient and family-centered care is an approach to planning, delivering, and evaluating healthcare that is grounded in mutually beneficial partnerships among providers, patients, and families. Considering this mutually beneficial partnership, how does meaningful recognition support the patient experience?
Oh, thank you for asking that. First of all, I would tell you that we know patients and families want to say thank you because we have over 2.1 million nominations that have been written so far for the Daisy Award. So clearly our need to say thank you when Patrick died in recognition of the work that his nurses had done for him and for us, it's a universal need. And in a study that Cindy was a significant contributor to, that we did a few years ago, actually, before the pandemic, we studied in a qualitative way, what does it mean to patients and families to be able to say thank you to their nurses? Because we knew what it meant to us, and we knew there are all these millions of nominations out there, but what was it that the patients and families were getting out of this? And you used the word mutually beneficial, and I would highlight a couple of the findings, and Cindy, please pitch in if I get any of this wrong. But the balance that being able to say thank you to a nurse creates for the patient is a very important thing, considering that the patients have been in an incredibly vulnerable position in an environment they don't understand and aren't accustomed to. And this nurse has been there for them and has made a difference in their experience. The patient wants to give something back and create a balance in that relationship. Cindy in her study referred to it as the synergy of the human connection, and I love that concept. Secondly, for patients and families, this ability to say thank you and write, or in the case of her interviews, tell the story of what nurses had done goes on and on and on, right, Cindy? I know you had a structured questionnaire you wanted to take them through, but you could hardly get off the first question because people want to share their experience.
Yep.
They want to tell the good stuff, which is so wonderful. And then the third thing that we discovered, and again, we know this is so true from our own experience, that recognition from a patient standpoint is a statement of gratitude that goes well beyond the moment and connects that patient to the healthcare organization who employs that nurse. How many nominations we have read that have said to the leadership of the organization, you are so lucky to have this nurse, she's my angel. So we've learned a great deal about the importance of the patient ability to say thank you through Daisy Award nominations. Did I do okay on that, Cindy?
Yeah, no, you nailed it. Yeah.
The other thing I've learned is when people have the ability to reflect and write down an experience that they're grateful for, they release very positive neurochemicals, such as dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And we don't want to go down a science lesson in this podcast, but I think it's really important just to mention that as well.
Well, go ahead, Bonnie. Go ahead.
There's a lot of science behind the expression of gratitude and what it does for people. And you've just named all of the chemical reaction that happens in the brain that I wouldn't be able to say. I just know what it feels like. You don't have to put a whole lot of description for me behind what it feels like. And that's what patients tell us, what it feels like.
Well, and as I'm listening to you, there's a lot of data coming out now about the impact of journaling. And I'm like, wow, well, I guess this is a form of journaling for the patient and their family or a coworker. And we know, it's like you said, it's very, very impactful in a positive way.
Yes. Okay, one last question for you, Bonnie. I know, I've known you for years, expressing gratitude is top priority and so important to you and your family and the Daisy Foundation. In the current climate, nurse leaders continue to identify strategies to decrease burnout. Will you explain how gratitude through meaningful recognition decreases burnout?
Well, I have to say pretty much everything I know, I have learned from Dr. Cindy Lefton. So again, Cindy, if I get any of this wrong, you'll help me. She has really been our entree into research and understanding. I will never forget the day she called me years ago and said, I think there is some kind of connection between Daisy, meaningful recognition, and compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue being defined as that common connection between burnout and secondary trauma. So after she explained all that to me, it made a whole lot of sense. And of course, she marched off to do this study she mentioned with Leslie Kelly on ICU nurses and compassion fatigue. What we've learned, and see this every day, is that those stories of what nurses do for patients and families when they are reflected back to the nurses connect them back to their purpose. They remind them why they became nurses through all the noise that's out there in their day-to-day work, whether it was before the pandemic or through these last 2 horrific years. They are reminded of the difference they've made. And in one of Cindy's studies that was around what does it take to energize a nurse emotionally, this concept of being reminded that you made a difference when you didn't even know you did is a key part of what is helping to offset, mitigate burnout.
Great. Okay, Bonnie, Cindy, with all of your meaningful moment experiences, what is the call to action for nurse leaders?
May I
Cindy?
say?
Please, yeah.
Okay. Number one, what we have learned over these 22 years is the importance of a structured, sustained, meaningful recognition program. Don't let it stop. The pandemic obviously played havoc with everybody and everything, but we're seeing that those healthcare organizations that kept their Daisy Awards going, that maintained and found the creative ways to make that happen through technology and Zoom and all of that we were able to come up with during the pandemic, those that didn't stop their programs are in a much better place now. Don't let it stop and keep it in this structured place because it means so much to nurses. So sustaining meaningful recognition is number one, no matter what. Nurses deserve nothing less. And my second call to action would be, don't forget the nurse leaders. We have our Daisy Nurse Leader Award that we created, and it came out of some work that Cindy had done for us. And when we then said, oh my gosh, we need to really pay attention to these leaders who create the environment where all this compassionate care is going on. And this year, we have launched a campaign with the American Organization for Nursing Leadership called Beyond Gratitude, a tribute to nurse managers. And it's really a way for clinicians, staff nurses, to nominate their managers and other leaders in the same way patients say thank you to their nurses. This is a way for staff to be able to say thank you to their managers and leaders for what they have done throughout the years to create the environment where nurses can do their best work. And those nominations for nurse leaders are, in my opinion, as powerful as those stories we read that patients write about their nurses. And it makes me so happy, Andrea, to know you are a Daisy Nurse Leader honoree.
Well, thank you.
Those are my calls to action.
Love them. Cindy, anything you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, I think, first of all, Bonnie's comments about the nurse leaders, we've known in the organizational psychology world for decades that people stay because of their leaders and they leave because of their leaders. So it's so critically important. And Leslie Kelly and another very smart nurse named Shelley Fisher, we did a study where we looked at compassion fatigue. It was published in JONA. On nurse leaders, and the ones that concerned us the most were the nurse managers, because they're so squished between all these leadership challenges and then frontline staff challenges. So for nurse leaders, director on up, watch your nurse managers, because they're in situations where they don't get a lot of positive feedback and they need it and they deserve it. And then I would say to all nursing leaders, regardless of what your title is. So I also am a bedside nurse. I'm a staff nurse also. I understand you are in meetings about very important things, but take some time, tell your assistants to put some time on your calendar and go out and round and catch all the right going on in your organizations. Because there's so much right going on, and we tend to focus on the wrong, the joint commission issues and the near misses, and all that stuff is important, but there's way more right going on. See it, in the moment, recognize your staff. That will do so much for their motivation. And also it'll instill in you as a leader that people are doing what you're asking them to do, and it'll make you feel good. And then you can put those stories in your newsletters and your meetings and your board meetings and all of these things that you have to do. But take some time to catch all the right going on. It'll nourish your soul too as a leader.
Wow, powerful. Catch all the right. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie, Cindy, I cannot thank you enough for this amazing opportunity. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for your meaningful moments, catching all the right, and thank you for always, always supporting nurses.
It's,
Thank you.
believe me, an honor for us to be able to do it, and an honor to be here with my very close friend, Dr. Lefton, who, as I said, has taught me everything I know and inspires me every day. Love you so
Back
much.
at
Cindy.
you. Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. The things that I've been able to do are because of you and Mark and Tina and the rest of the Daisy Foundation. And I appreciate the opportunity to do this very important work. And Andrea, thank you for giving us another avenue to get the word out about how to recognize people. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So take care and thank you again.